Alright, so Tiburon is back again, getting absolutely destroyed by pollen. The trees smell like garbage, and so much of the wrap is really not loving all the dirt, especially the tires. Goddamn. For now, we're going to completely forget that that side exists, and we're only going to look at this shady side that looks nice and clean. So, second season with the wrap, it's actually holding up pretty well, besides the fact that it collects scratches. Did a nice fat one. No idea how that happened, but you can see it in every and all lighting. Over on my forbidden side over here, these two panels were rewrapped. There's a slight color difference. Sometimes it really jumps out at you. In this lighting, you really can't tell, which is great. I'm just gonna forever keep it in the shade. But yeah, overall, the car is doing really well. Obviously, so many things still need to get done. The wheels need to be changed. That fitment is awful. So update aside, the reason I'm making this video is to address another question that I get asked a lot about this car, and that is if I would recommend it. I know I touched on this a little bit in one of my other videos, but I wanted to do an in-depth explanation to kind of cover what I would tell people when they ask me if I would recommend the car for them and what my kind of opinions are on the car. So obviously I'm obsessed with this car. I love it, never want to get rid of it, always will recommend it and think that it's great, but I do of course understand that it's not for everyone, and I think it's just as important to be realistic with people so they don't end up in a bad situation with a car they can't afford and the car might get neglected. Some of the situations where they expected more from the car, didn't get it, so it's kind of good for everyone to be able to make a good decision on the car. So the two main things I start by asking people is what's your budget and what's your goals for the car? What are you looking for in the car? So of course, when it comes to power, most people know, but not everyone knows that these are pretty underpowered cars. The V6 is only 172 horsepower and the four-cylinder I think is 130, 140. So there's the people that will see that as a challenge, and then there's the people who will run the numbers and think of how much it would be to make power, how difficult it is. So in the car scene, it's always a little difficult with these. I do think it's a great car, it's a great project car. You learn so much on this car, and I think it's really rewarding once you kind of make them into a great build. I think they have a lot of potential, but for some people that's just not worth it. And either way is fine. Of course, I'm on the side of I don't care how much money I put into it, I just love the car. Obviously, there's the reasonable side that thinks about the fact that there are better platforms, your money goes a longer way in those platforms, and if you are looking for respect in the car community and things like that are of importance to you, this probably isn't the car for you. This car in the car scene is definitely not for the weak. If you are bothered by the things that people will say, if they criticize your choice in car, criticize the things you do, you will get a ton of that just because it's a Tiburon. Car scene stuff aside, then there's the people who are looking for a daily driver that is reliable. Now, if you want a daily driver and you also just really love the car, or you want it to make it a project car, then that's totally fine. If you're someone who isn't really looking for it to be a project car, you just want a reliable daily, especially if you're making a lot of trips and you're driving a lot of kilometers, I would not recommend this car. Now, these things can take a lot. They will run forever. They will definitely try to run forever. But if you're planning on not fixing a lot and you just drive it a lot and you're hoping that with leaks and bad suspension and steering issues that the car is going to still perform, like say a Honda Civic that can just be barely alive and still going down in the highway, I would not do it on this one. But that goes for literally any old car. They're just not going to be a good time when you really need them, if you're like a delivery driver or drive very far, very often, and you don't have the money to really be fixing things that go wrong. It's just not the greatest idea because things will go wrong. And it is a very reliable car. I've never had this thing break down. I've never had a check engine light. So when these things are taken care of, they can be really good, but things do break, and I've actually had to put a good amount of money into maintenance and fixing things. That's things that would break and get old with any old car over the age of 6, and these are pushing 15. When you pick up one of these cars, your shocks are probably going to be blown. I've had to replace pads, rotors, calipers. The back ones will seize. but that's happened to any car. Even the Mazda has issues. You're gonna get oil leaks, lines, fuel lines, all types of lines kind of degrade or they rust out, and you're gonna have issues. This is all related to just the age and the wear of the car, especially mileage. The thing with a car like this is it's cheap to buy, really cheap to buy, and the parts may be cheap. Some of them on this are a little bit expensive, but what you'll catch up to with a new car in, say, monthly car payments, you're going to have to save some money, put some money away for the times that this thing will need maintenance, and it will. Especially if you drive the car often, the things that need to be fixed will be hitting you at a much faster rate. And of course, some of the more integral things that you need done right away are going to be costing you a decent amount of money. If you want to know more about general problems with the car, I do have another video on that covers all the common problems that will happen to this car, but the main takeaway is old car is going to need some maintenance. So project car wise, and also budget is in a bit of this too. There's kind of two ways you can go about making this a project car. There's the people who are extremely mechanically inclined and can do engine swaps and a lot of custom fab. Obviously with this car, that is the best position you could possibly be in, and there is a good amount of people doing really amazing builds for these. I'll actually link some of them that I know. You can check some of those out, really inspiring builds. There's one guy doing a V12 Tiburon, which is absolutely crazy. I love it. But it does require a lot of skill and a lot of dedication. So if you aren't able to do things yourself and you're trying to rely on a shop or just in general trying to make power really quickly, this would be a very complicated project. One thing, just going to shops, many if not all can't actually tune the car, and there is one guy who's able to tune the ECU. I think he's out in Australia and you ship it to him. But it does get complicated, and again, I've mentioned this before in another video, but parts are very hard to find, especially the superchargers. Comes to turbos, you have to do a whole custom setup, so there is a lot of money involved to get these to have power. That's something that kind of concerns you when you're not fully dedicated to having this specific car make a certain power. I would definitely make sure you consider all of your options of other platforms, because for these cars specifically, it's definitely not an easy ride at all when it comes to ordering parts and finding things for these cars and putting it all together. It takes a lot of dedication. And for some people with the money and the platform, it's just not worth it, and that's totally okay, but it's definitely something that you want to thoroughly look through and familiarize yourself with, so you're not ending up disappointed and having to sell the car. The one bright side is if you are dedicated, and I would say this car has a pretty good cult following. There is a lot of people, including myself, that are obsessed with this car and have wanted it for a really long time, maybe couldn't get it as a kid, or in general have seen the car and fell in love with it and want this car specifically, kind of no matter what, and they know what it is and they still want it. I would say definitely get the car. There's even a good amount of the community that has had this car, even to this day, many years later, many other cars later, regret selling it and really want another one. I think that definitely says something, that even though it's considered very slow and it gets kind of a bad reputation in the car community, if this many people who owned it for a couple years and fell in love with it and still love it many years later, and it stays kind of in their memory, that definitely shows that this is a car that shouldn't be overlooked and is definitely underrated. This car, for me personally, has everything that I wanted in a sporty car, obviously besides the power. I do think the power is totally fine if you're, not a street racer and you're just driving this thing daily on the highway or just in some, joyrides, some twisty roads. It has a low center of gravity, it has tight suspension, it has tight steering. The car does really well on curves. Obviously, it only performs as well as the maintenance on it is done, so when you first get the car, definitely check all of the suspension, all of the sway bar links, everything related to steering and suspension to make this car handle better. Look into. Definitely if the thing is driving noticeably odd, and check into everything that makes this car stable and running well, and then you'll really get the feel for what it's actually supposed to be. Had to move into some light because the sun is starting to set super fast and my phone doesn't like it. But yeah, that concludes everything. I would tell someone what to consider if it's right for them or not. Hopefully it helps you. Definitely, as always, leave your extra thoughts and corrections in the comments. In general, I want more people to understand what the car is, know what they're getting into, just so this car can get more of the appreciation and understanding that it deserves.